The bus station had learned how to hold its breath. On Christmas night, it waited under flickering fluorescent lights, snow hissing softly as it struck the concrete like whispered warnings. Wind slid through the open sides of the shelter, biting at anything warm, searching for skin. Evelyn Harper sat on the far end of a metal bench, shoulders curled inward, hands buried uselessly in the thin pockets of her coat. Her breath fogged the air in front of her face, then vanished, as if even it refused to stay. Her gloves were gone. She wasn't sure when she'd lost them, only that her fingers ached with a dull, burning sting, the kind that blurred thought and slowed time. A bus groaned somewhere down the road, then pulled away without stopping, red taillights dissolving into falling snow. Evelyn didn't look up. She had learned not to expect things to arrive when they were needed. Above her, a plastic wreath hung crookedly from a pole, its silver ribbons snapping in the wind. Christmas music drifted faintly from a distant shop, warped and hollow by the cold. Evelyn pressed her knees together and stared at the dark line of trees beyond the station, counting the seconds between passing cars. Each one sounded less likely to stop. She told herself she was fine. She had been telling herself that for weeks. Fine meant upright. Fine meant breathing. Fine meant not crying where strangers could see. Footsteps approached from the right, slow and unhurried, crunching against frozen slush. They stopped a few feet away. Evelyn felt the shift in the air before she heard a voice. "You'll freeze out here if you stay." It wasn't sharp or commanding. It sounded almost tired, like a fact the night had already proven. Evelyn lifted her eyes. A man stood near the edge of the shelter, tall, dark coat dusted with snow, scarf hanging loose at his collar. He looked young, younger than his steady posture suggested, with tired eyes that had learned how to stay gentle. "I'm okay," she said. Her voice came out thinner than she meant it to. "My bus is late." He glanced at the empty road, then back at her bare hands. Something quiet tightened in his expression. "They usually are," he said. "Still doesn't make this safe." Evelyn bristled, more from instinct than anger. "I didn't ask for help." "I know." He paused, as if choosing where to stand, how much space to take up. "I'm Henry." She nodded once. "Evelyn." Snow thickened between them, drifting sideways now, filling the shelter with a restless white veil. Henry slipped his gloves off and held them out, palm open, not moving closer. The gesture felt careful, almost reverent. "Just for a minute," he said. "You can give them back." Evelyn hesitated. Pride warred with pain. Her fingers throbbed, numb and burning all at once. Finally, she reached for the gloves. The leather was warm, impossibly warm, like they had been waiting for her hands. She pulled them on, exhaling despite herself. "Thank you," she said, softer now. Henry nodded, satisfied, and leaned back against the shelter post. Silence settled, companionable but alert. Evelyn studied him in her periphery. His coat was expensive but worn at the cuffs. His hair was dusted with snow that he hadn't bothered to brush away. He looked like someone used to being responsible, someone who stood still even when the world rushed past. A car idled nearby, engine humming steadily, heat trapped behind fogged windows. Through the glass, Evelyn caught a glimpse of the back seat. A small shape, bundled in a blanket, the rise and fall of sleep. "A child. That your son?" she asked before she could stop herself. Henry followed her gaze. "Yeah. Noah." His voice warmed when he said the name. "He's 6. Something loosened in Evelyn's chest, unexpected and sharp. "He shouldn't be out in this." "He's not," Henry said gently. "He's warm. I just needed gas. Saw you sitting here." Evelyn looked back down the road. Snow erased distance, erased certainty. She imagined the night stretching on, buses canceling one by one, the cold settling deeper into her bones. She imagined standing up and walking nowhere, because nowhere was better than waiting. Henry straightened. "I'm headed back toward the west side," he said. "If your bus doesn't come soon, I can give you a ride somewhere warm. A cafe. A shelter. Anywhere you choose." The offer hung between them, fragile as glass. Evelyn felt the familiar pull of refusal, the practiced urge to say no before hope could form. Then the wind surged again, slicing through her coat, and her hands ached even inside the gloves. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang once, muffled by snow, marking an hour she hadn't noticed passing. Time felt fragile here, stretched thin, and Evelyn realized staying was also a choice, one that could cost her more than pride if she waited too long. The thought settled heavily, steady and undeniable in her chest. At last! Snow softened as soon as Evelyn slid into the passenger seat, as if the world had agreed to lower its voice. The door closed with a solid, reassuring sound, sealing her inside a pocket of warmth that made her chest ache. The heater hummed steadily, pushing air that smelled faintly of pine and clean fabric. Henry reached across to turn the dial down, careful not to look at her too directly, as though warmth itself required consent. "Just tell me if it's too much," he said, eyes on the road. "It's fine," Evelyn replied, though her shoulders were already sinking, tension loosening inch by inch. She pulled the gloves off, setting them carefully in her lap, and watched her fingers redden as feeling returned. Pain flared, then faded into something bearable. Outside, snow blurred the edges of everything, turning streetlights into soft halos. They drove without hurry. The city looked different from inside the car, quieter, like a place holding a secret. Evelyn noticed small details she hadn't had the energy to see before. The stitched steering wheel cover, the faint scratch on the dashboard, a folded paper star taped crookedly above the radio. It had been colored with uneven lines, yellow crayon pressed too hard. Henry caught her looking. "Noah made that," he said. "It's supposed to be the North Star." "It's beautiful," she said, and meant it. In the back seat, a small shape shifted. The blanket moved, revealing a boy's face, cheeks flushed with sleep, lashes dark against pale skin. He stirred, eyes fluttering open, unfocused at first. Then he looked at Evelyn. "Dad," he murmured. "Is she cold?" Henry glanced in the rearview mirror, something unguarded passing through his expression. "She was," he said. "She's warming up now." Noah nodded, satisfied, and curled back into the blanket, one hand clutching a stuffed bear with a missing ear. Evelyn swallowed, a tightness forming behind her ribs that surprised her with its intensity. No one had checked on her like that in a long time. The car turned onto a quieter street, houses hunched beneath layers of snow, windows glowing amber behind drawn curtains. Henry pulled into a driveway at the end of the block and cut the engine. Silence settled, thick and soft. "You don't have to stay," he said quickly, before she could speak. "I can make you tea, let you warm up, then take you wherever you need. I just didn't want to leave you out there." Evelyn considered the house, modest and unassuming, light spilling gently onto the snow. She thought of the bus station bench, the metal cold, the wind relentless. "1 cup of tea," she said. "Then I'll go." Inside, the house breathed warmth. The air smelled of cinnamon and something baked earlier in the day. Henry moved with quiet efficiency, hanging coats, setting a kettle on the stove. Evelyn stood near the doorway, unsure where to put herself, until Noah patted in, blanket trailing behind him like a cape. "You can sit," he said solemnly, pointing to the couch. "It's the warm spot." She smiled despite herself and did as instructed. The cushions held her gently, the fabric soft against her skin. Henry returned with 2 mugs, steam curling upward. He handed one to her, fingers brushing briefly, then retreated to the armchair opposite, leaving space between them. They drank in silence. The tea warmed Evelyn from the inside out, a slow spreading comfort that reached places she hadn't realized were cold. She listened to the house settle, to Noah's breathing as he drifted back to sleep curled against his father's side. Henry rested a hand on the boy's hair, thumb moving in a small, absent circle. "You can sleep here tonight," he said quietly, eyes still on Noah. "Just sleep. Nothing else." Evelyn looked at him, really looked, at the careful lines around his mouth, the steadiness that felt practiced rather than effortless. She nodded once, the decision landing with unexpected relief. The fear hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, edged now with something fragile and unfamiliar. As she followed him down the hallway toward the guest room, she noticed a framed photograph on the wall, half lit by a night lamp, and the smile frozen there stirred a question she wasn't ready to ask yet. The house slept lightly, like someone resting with one eye open. Heat ticked through the vents in soft pulses, and the clock above the stove marked time without sound. Evelyn woke before she meant to, the remnants of a dream dissolving as she stared at the ceiling of the guest room. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then warmth pressed gently against her skin, unfamiliar and undeniable, and memory returned. She padded down the hallway, bare feet silent on the wooden floor. A single light glowed in the kitchen, low and amber, as if meant only for whoever happened to wander there. Henry sat at the small table, elbows resting near two mugs, steam rising lazily between them. He looked up when he saw her, surprise flickering and fading into something like relief. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She shook her head and took the chair opposite him. The candle between them cast long shadows, turning the room into a contained world, small and deliberate. Outside the window, snow drifted down in slow, steady arcs, catching the light before disappearing. They didn't speak for a while. Silence settled without pressure, the kind that felt chosen rather than imposed. Evelyn wrapped her hands around the mug, absorbing the warmth, and studied the way Henry's gaze rested on nothing in particular, as though his thoughts moved carefully, step by step. "I'm not usually like this," she said finally. "Taking help, I mean." Henry nodded. "I didn't think you were." That simple acknowledgement loosened something inside her. She told him about her mother, about the hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and lilies, about the apartment that no longer felt like hers once the furniture was gone. She spoke without urgency, words arriving calmly, as if she were describing a painting rather than her own life. Henry listened without interruption, his face open, his hands still. When she finished, the candle flickered, bending briefly before straightening again. Henry exhaled slowly. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said. "Cancer. Fast at the end." He paused, eyes lowering to the table. "My brother followed her 6 months later. Car accident. Noah was barely 4. Evelyn absorbed this quietly. There was no drama in his voice, no attempt to soften or sharpen the truth. It simply existed, heavy but contained. She recognized that restraint, the discipline of surviving without spectacle. Noah appeared in the doorway then, clutching his blanket, eyes half-lidded. He crossed the room and draped the blanket over Evelyn's shoulders with solemn care. "You forgot this," he said, as if it were obvious. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded and leaned against Henry's leg, thumb in his mouth, already drifting back toward sleep. Henry lifted him easily, settling him against his chest. For a moment, Evelyn watched them, the effortless fit of father and son, the quiet choreography of familiarity. Later, as dawn hinted at itself beyond the curtains, Evelyn sat on the floor with Noah, crayons scattered between them. He drew a house with smoke curling from the chimney, pressing the paper so hard it nearly tore. She added windows, light spilling from each one. Henry watched from the doorway, unseen until he wasn't. When she stood to return the crayons, her eyes caught on the photograph upstairs, now fully visible in the growing light. Henry stood beside a woman, both smiling, joy unguarded. Evelyn's breath caught. The warmth she'd gathered through the night shifted, uncertainty threading through it. She turned away before Henry could see her looking, the question settling silently in her chest, waiting. Morning arrived quietly, as if unsure it was welcome. Pale light crept through the curtains, thinning the shadows and softening the edges of the room. Evelyn woke with that light on her face, and the ache of realization in her chest. For a few fragile seconds, she stayed still, pretending the warmth around her wasn't temporary. Then the memory of the photograph returned. Henry's smile beside another woman, whole and certain, and the old instinct rose again. Leave before you misunderstand. Leave before you hope. She dressed carefully, folding the borrowed sweater, and placing it on the bed as though returning something sacred. The house was silent except for the low murmur of the heater. In the kitchen, she wrote a short note on the corner of a grocery receipt, words spare and polite, gratitude restrained so it wouldn't feel like an anchor. When she reached the front door, her hand hesitated on the knob. Warmth pressed against her back, reluctant to let her go. Henry's voice stopped her. Evelyn. He stood at the end of the hallway, fully awake now, hair slightly mussed, eyes searching her face without accusation. She swallowed, fingers tightening around her coat. I didn't want to wake anyone. You didn't, he said. I just heard the door. They stood there, distance measured in steps neither took. The unspoken filled the space between them. Evelyn lifted her chin. You don't owe me anything, she said. Last night was enough. Henry studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Can I drive you? She agreed because refusal felt like another kind of fear. The bus station looked different in daylight. Snow lay undisturbed, clean and bright, the metal bench no longer menacing, just ordinary. The same plastic wreath fluttered above, dulled now by morning. Henry parked and cut the engine. The quiet felt heavier here, charged with what had begun and what might end. Evelyn turned toward him, words ready, then faltered. The photo, she said finally. I didn't mean to see it, but I did. Understanding crossed his face, slow and steady. That's Lily, he said. Noah's mother. He paused, letting the truth sit plainly between them. She died 3 years ago. I keep the photo because Noah needs to remember her smile. And because pretending she never existed would be another kind of loss. Shame flushed through Evelyn, sharp and brief. I'm sorry. I assumed. It's okay, he said gently. Assumptions are how we protect ourselves. They stepped out of the car together, cold air brushing their faces, familiar now rather than cruel. Evelyn looked down the empty road, then back at Henry. Something inside her shifted, aligning with a truth she could no longer ignore. Leaving wouldn't keep her safe, it would only keep her alone. I don't know where I'm going, she admitted. Henry didn't rush to fill the silence. You don't have to know today. She met his eyes, steady and kind, and made a choice that felt like stepping into light. Could I come back? Just for breakfast. A smile touched his mouth, quiet but unmistakable. We'd like that. Back at the house, the kitchen filled with simple sounds. Bread toasting, a kettle clicking off, Noah's sleepy chatter about snow forts. Sunlight pooled on the table, warming the wood, catching in the steam of their mugs. They ate together, unhurried, laughter rising and settling like breath. Evelyn held her cup with both hands, feeling its heat seep into her palms. Outside, snow melted from the branches, dripping steadily to the ground. Inside, something gentler took its place. Not a promise, not a declaration, just belonging, offered without demand and finally accepted.